recorded, chaps.
Okay.
Hello,
Right, April
good
27th, China Exchange, wine, cider, beer, charcuterie, producers, taste competition cheeses. We've got how many cheeses in total? 10.
Yes, 10
Is
cheeses.
it 12 or 10 competitors, 12 cheeses, is it?
Eight competitors, 10 cheeses. Welcome everybody into the webinar. Lovely to have you. We're just going to give you a couple of minutes to join as everybody joins.
We do want to hear where you are. As you join us, we'd love to hear which country you're calling from. Even if it's just down the road, the wonder of the internet is going to join us all here together in cheese luxury. So introduce yourself on the chat, say who you are, anything you like. Let's get started. West London is up first from EM, whoever EM is. Nice to meet you, EM. West London feels like a very close by. So oh, that's Ed Moses, and that's Tracy. We want to hear, we've got two competitors here tonight. We're talking about the 10 cheeses that are being carefully looked after and brushed and washed and shaped and flavored, all of them out of Mary's enormous and fantastic cheese cathedral down in the West Country. They have reached these competitors at 3 months old, so they were babes in arms, and I was lucky enough to be down there last week cuddling up to them when they were young and clean and naive, all perfect little yellow cheeses in her nursery cheese store. But these guys, Alex and Rupert, have been taking them on and going and training them up, getting them ready for the Grand National of Cheese Affineur competitions on April the 27th. So I've got Josh from Murray's Cheese in New York City. Good afternoon, America. We've got Canada, Guelph. Oh, my cousin, no, my nephew was in Guelph the other day. He had a very bad skiing accident. So rather sadly, but he's fine now, which is all very important. But it's good skiing. I hope you've still got some snow there. We've got York and Edinburgh, two from Edinburgh. It's good to see. Oxfordshire, not so far away, but lovely this time of year. I've got to go there on Friday to see my aunt. So this is all about the socialness of cheese. So it is time, Tracy, for me to start introducing.
Sure, yeah, let's get cracking. Everybody, welcome. Charlie is your host tonight. We're delighted to have Mary with us as well. So please do put your questions in the chat, and I will, or in the Q&A box, and I will forward those forwards to the panelists, and we can crack on. So Charlie, I'm going to disappear and hand over to you lovely people, and you can introduce Rupert and Alex. Thank you.
Okay, to set the scene, just in case you don't know, on the 27th of April, we have 10 cheeses that have come from Mary that go forward to the Affineur of the Year competition, which is being hosted by us, the Academy of Cheese. It'll be happening in Chinatown in London. It's an event that you can participate in and come to. And we have 8 competitors for those 10 cheeses. So 2 of those competitors very, very cheekily have taken 2 cheeses off Mary and actually trying them in different ways. But tonight, we have Rupert Linden from Brindisa, who are, am I allowed to call the leading Spanish artisan importer, or is that not fair on some other very reputable businesses, Rupert?
We probably might have been doing it for the longest.
Okay, the longest.
We've been doing it for a very long time.
And so, Rupert, tell us a bit about Brindisa, tell us about yourself, and then let's hear about your cheese.
Well, Brindisa, we're a company that imports different kinds of food from Spain, and we've been doing it since 1988, I think. And so we import like a really wide range of foods, but one of the categories that we have like really specialized in from the beginning is some Spanish cheeses, and particularly Spanish sheep's milk cheeses. Those are, like Manchego is the most famous, but you know, there's lots of other
your
ones
bestseller,
we love
I'm
to do.
assuming.
It's by a long way, yeah. Yeah.
And that is a long way from the Manchegos you might get in your average supermarket, I'm assuming. I'm not assuming, I know, of course.
Well, yeah, they are. I mean, it's a bit similar to British cheddars, really. You know, you get the artisan cheddars, and then you get your standard kind of, you know, normal kind of block cheddar. And so there's a difference in quality and a difference of amount of effort that goes into making them.
But you would describe yourself as an affineur, wouldn't you, of Spanish cheeses?
But me personally, Well, yes. I mean, I suppose what it is because we import our food from Spain. It has this kind of journey that it has to make from Spain to the UK, and then there's a certain amount of time that we hold the cheeses for before we sell them. So in that time that I've got the cheeses, then we try to look after them in different ways, and over the years we found out that some cheeses need more care than others, and some cheeses are perfectly happy just at kind of 5 degrees in their cardboard box, and other cheeses have got more sensitive rinds, and then we put them in the kind of, we've got 2 rooms really. There's 2 choices, and they'll either go in one room or into the other. And,
I'm lucky enough to have visited. You've got those kind of terracotta surrounds to your maturing rooms, haven't you?
Well, yes. I mean, the design of our so the room that we call the brick room, which is where we keep our hard cheeses and where we've got the cheddar, is made with bricks that we imported from Spain. It was made in association with a Spanish consultant called José Luis Martín, who, strangely enough, I met when I was a student, and I used to look after his goats. I was doing woofing, and
working
many years
on
later,
organic farming.
Yeah, because he introduced he designed the first protocol for organic cheese in Spain.
Oh, right.
And so he was a real pioneer of organic goat cheese in Spain. And so over the years, he's become more and more experienced with Spanish cheeses, and he helped us to design our room in Balham. And so, but I mean, what's really different, what I think is different about our room in Balham, is that when you go into that room, it's full of sheep's milk cheeses and goat's milk cheeses. And although we do have the mahon in there, which is a cow's milk cheese, but as you walk in, the smell of the room is sheep and goat. It's like being in a dairy in Spain. So
you get a sweetness, a real aromatic sort of herbaceousness, maybe a little bit of farmyard coating around, and
the kind of lanolin really of the sweetness of the sheep, and those kind of savoury flavours. Yeah, that's what really strikes me. And because when I visit other dairies that mostly work with cow's milk cheese, and there's just clearly a different smell, really. Yeah.
So your entry into Affineurism is really about just taking care of those cheeses once they've arrived, and you've discovered that they struggle during the transfer over the water into the UK, and they need to be brought back to life, and some of them are quite fragile. So it was necessity rather than art initially. But have you brought art to it? Are you doing something unusual to any of your cheeses apart from Mary's and this?
Well, basically we kind of collaborate with our cheesemakers, and we try to continue what they do in Spain. So the different cheeses have different paths that they go through. I mean, not necessarily particularly complicated paths. There's a cheese which we get from the Pyrenees, which we're storing right next to our cheddar, called the Garrocha, and that's got, I only know the name of the rind in Catalan, unfortunately, which is called Pell Florida. It's Pell Florida, but so in English, it's the grey fluffy rind, basically. Okay. And so when you touch it, it's kind of like velvet. It's like this.
And you leave you leave fingerprints on it, kind of thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, eventually, so if it gets a bit out of control, because the rind can go totally out of control. And when we used to leave them in the box kind of years ago, when they were unwrapped, they'd actually all join together. Yeah. You could pick 6 cheeses up like a carpet, and they'd all, and then you'd have to cut them apart.
Cut them apart
again. Yeah. I mean, the strength of the rind is quite something. So those cheeses need quite high moisture and very little air circulation. Really, we keep them in the plastic trays with paper on top, and we try to reduce the movement of air to stop the rinds from drying off. And so we're quite pleased. Most of the year it's good. In the summer it's more difficult. It's drier in Spain and drier here, but in the UK as well.
I think this is something we're going to touch on, with Mary as well, is that these molds, and in fact when we come to cheese mite, it's as much keeping them down as keeping them up. You need them to keep them going, but you don't need them to explode in character. You need them to retain a certain gentleness as they mature the cheese over time. Alex, let's turn to you. We've got Paxton and Whitfield represented by you here, or you're representing Paxton, which, get me right, how many years Paxton now been open on your site?
Yes, so we've now been open for 225 years this year.
That's
So
an astonishing
225th
result.
anniversary. 1797, the company was founded as a partnership, and it was actually trading for about 30 years before that. We started off as a market stall on what was the Old Witch Market. It's not there anymore.
I'm going out on a limb here. Was it Mr. Paxton and Mr. Whitfield?
It wasn't actually. Paxton and Whitfield came along later, and they were brought into the partnership by a man called Charles. His name is not recorded in the partnership. Just Paxton and Whitfield live on.
Oh dear, he's going to regret that. There's some famous cheese lover out there who's not getting their due recognition. So you're sitting in a cellar that's what, 10 feet below ground underneath an event that's actually going on as we speak in Paxton Whitfield.
Yes, sadly I wasn't able to show you our lovely shop behind me here. We do have another event going on upstairs at the moment. So I'm down in the cellar, so I'm much closer to the cheeses. We have a small maturing cellar down here, where we keep the cheeses for our London operation. In terms of the affinage that we do down here, it's quite small scale what we're able to do in these cellars particularly. You must have
quite a lot of fast moving stock and small storage space. So I imagine you're getting deliveries every day, every other day, and really traditionally that place where you're holding your cheese is just a passing through space.
Yes, it's not often that we get the chance, and one of the exciting things about this project is that we have the chance to affect the flavor of a cheese over a longer period. It's not something that we've in the past been able to do, especially in this site. We have another site in the Cotswolds, which we've just moved into a larger premises actually. Over September last year, we moved across into a premises twice the size. It's just opposite the old one, across the street in the Cotswolds, in Bourton on the Water. And in this new space, we have much larger maturing facilities, which is really exciting.
So Paxton's are going to go into maturing or affinaging cheese, because you've always sold cheeses under your, well, I say always, certainly in the last 10 years, sold cheeses under your own name, Paxton Whitfield, cheddars, Stiltons, that you claim as your own in an affineuring kind of way. So that's something you're going to do more of.
Yes, we've been selecting from the producers cheeses that we sell for a long time now. So our buyers will go down to the cheesemakers, meet them, try a few different batches of their cheeses and select a whole batch that we feel has the qualities that we're looking for in that particular cheese. That's what we've been doing up until now. What the larger maturing spaces will allow us to do is we will still go in and speak with the cheesemakers and taste different batches of cheese. What we will do now is take them on at a younger age, bring the batch to the Cotswolds, where our team there will start to care for it, and we can really start to then tweak to a finer degree what it is exactly we want out of that cheese, and to pinpoint the flavor profile that we're looking for each particular cheese, which is, again, it's something we've been able to do in a much shorter term way. The affinage that we've done in Jermyn Street, especially in the past, has been a lot more short term, especially with soft cheeses. I think similar to what Rupert was saying, actually, soft cheeses, the care they need is a lot more immediate because they ripen so much faster,
and they've got more water in there, so it's all happening. It's more of a disco than a slow dance.
Yeah, it's a very hands-on sort of day-to-day care. So a lot more turning, brushing. They're often a much smaller size, which means they need to be turned more often. The higher moisture content makes them a lot more tricky to look after.
Mary, what I think Alex is saying is that your cheese is really easy to mature. That's his point here. You know, don't know what all the fuss is about. Why are we even bothering? We just leave it on a shelf and that's it. So I'll introduce everybody. This is Mary Quick, the goddess of Devon, who's been making cheese, or rather her family's been making on her cheese on her farm since oh God, I can't get this right, 1540 or something like that.
Well, we've been on the farm that long, and there was a gap from the First World War to the 1970s when in making cheese. But
okay, I think we can just ignore that and say that's 500 years of quality cheese making, small, large, commercial, domestic. So tell us a little bit about where these cheeses come from, Mary. What, you know, you're just north of Exeter, yes?
So just north of Exeter, we farm in the beautiful, lush, rich Creedy Valley. We've now got nearly 700 cows grazing outside almost all the time. You know, so we've got some of those lovely grass-fed flavours. We use the lovely heritage Barber's starters, originally from whey, coming from you know, natural souring of milk. So you've got these highly complex starters. We make the cheese very traditionally, hand cheddared. We use Cornish sea salt as the salt. We cloth rind. You know, we press for 3 days. So kind of all of that. And the thing that we have kind of no perspective over, and then we put them in a nursery store for 3 months, and then we put them in our cheese cathedral from 3 months old to maybe 2 years old, as old as they will go. And we know what there is to do. You know, we know to turn, we know to do this, we know to do that, but we have no perspective on what is possible. And that's what is so incredibly exciting about this Affineur of the Year competition, is hearing what Rupert, hearing what Alex, what all of the competitors are doing, kind of what their take is on our cheese and kind of what's possible. And I know you say that it's easy, but, or, you know, yes, I mean, I think a cheddar is a much more tolerant beast than a little, you know, a little mold-ripened cheese or a Brevibacteria linens, or although there's a whole bundle of Brevibacteria linens on the cheddar round, which is interesting, even though we don't put it there. And the but what was interesting when this whole competition came from when we swapped two cheese. We had 4 cheeses, 2 cheeses of ours, 2 cheeses from Montgomery's. We swapped one over and realized that we were actually, by just simply maturing, doing the things that we all did normally, we were actually creating a completely new flavor. And that was so right to the heart of the cheese. And then when we swapped them back, we got a different flavor right to the heart of the cheese. So at that point, we thought something's up, and we really, you know, there's this whole amazing thing of affinage that in this country we really don't, you know, Rupert may be doing it and Alex may be doing it, but in general, us cheesemakers have no sense of what's possible. And I just think that's really exciting to have the cheesemongers have that agency in the cheeses that they're producing.
Yeah, there's a rather bad joke, but why did the cheesemaker cross the road? It's because he did it last year, and that sort of defines all cheesemaking. Don't change anything. And we've got these stores, whether they're with Rupert in London or whether, you know, or in the Cotswold or in Spain or wherever. We've got these invisible biomes. We've got all the bacteria and the molds and the yeasts going on inside a room that you can't see. You know they're there, you know they're active, you're trying to keep them alive, but you don't know what they're doing on a moment-to-moment basis. So, Rupert, you've got an opportunity here, as Mary says, to do something weird. What have you done?
Well, because we import Spanish cheese, we thought we'd try to do like a Spanish recipe with the the cheddar, basically. And so we had two options really, or because otherwise, you know, if we'd have treated it like a manchego, basically we'd have just left it there, brushed it every couple of weeks and turned it, and then that would have been fine for you know, would have been interesting as well. But there was two cheeses that me and Roy, who I work with, really love from our Spanish cheeses. There's one called Grazalema, which is rubbed in lard and in Iberico, you know, ham lard. And the traditional recipe for that is you get a semi-cured cheese, and then you wrap it in, you coat it in lard, and then weirdly enough, they mature it at 20 degrees for the next 6 months.
20 degrees.
And yeah, because it's a recipe from Andalusia, and so it's kind of, it's just a room temperature. And Andalusia, you know, these days in the summer, it's like, you know, 38 degrees. So, but then we thought we wouldn't be able to reproduce that here in the UK.
No, not unless anybody
also,
eat it.
Well, yeah, the thing is, because they start with a semi-cured cheese, it's already got to that level that it's already, you know, pretty safe. I mean, and it's all, you know, totally above board and approved by the EU and all the rest of it. And
It won't get unsafe. It just might get quite funky.
Oh well, it is. It is. Yeah. But basically, we thought lard. You know, it was just, you know, we didn't want to have too much lard also in our rooms. So we decided. I spoke to a friend of mine who we buy our Menorcan cheese from. And the Menorcan cheese is also a cow's milk cheese. And so with the Menorcan cheese, the person we buy Menorcan cheese is an Affineur in Menorca. And his family business, traditionally, they used to be kind of traveling salesmen, basically. They'd go around all the farms selling, you know, spades or different kinds of agricultural equipment. And then in return, when the farmers didn't have, you know, ready cash to pay for the equipment they needed, they were paid in cheeses. And so I mean, this is like, you know, in the 1880s when it was started. And so over the decades, they became Affineurs by default, because they were being paid in cheese from a subsistence economy rather than in the debit card. Like today.
Those famous 1880 debit card.
Yeah, and so he, with his, I spoke with him, and his cheeses, the way that he matures them, and what we also do to our Mahon cheese in London is we oil the cheese with olive oil, and we make it kind of a paste really of olive oil and paprika, Spanish paprika called.
Now we're getting to another bit. This is what we want to see. Tell us about your paprika.
And so we're using well, basically the most terrifying moment of really when we received the cheese, and we thought, like, you know, what on earth are we going to do with it? And then so we let it rest for about 4 or 5 weeks to see what was going to happen. And then we thought, well, let's just do it. Let's just take the cloth off and we'll oil it. And then we're just like, because we thought at least if it's going to crack, hopefully it'll crack in the first week, and then we'll know that we don't have to worry about it for the next like 9 months. And but it hasn't cracked yet, touch wood.
So you gave it a chance to get used to your cellars, and then you went for it.
Yeah,
For those people who want to see what this looks like, there are nice pictures on the Academy website, and possibly on your Instagram as well, Rupert. I don't know whether you're publishing.
Yeah, on our Instagram. Yeah, there should be something. Yeah. And well, I mean, I'm sure there is actually. Yeah, definitely. And but one of the things is when you oil the cheese and cover it in the paprika, so we're replacing the cloth binding with oil, which itself seals the cheese. And so we had to get the balance right between, if we seal the cheese too much, then it wouldn't breathe, it wouldn't necessarily lose moisture at the same rate. And so speaking with my Menorcan friend, he was saying the thing to do is you always want to wait for the rind to bloom again. So make sure it's like really properly blooming. So on his cheeses, which are about 2.5 kilos to 3 kilo cheeses, we normally wait between like 9 and 14 days before we re-oil the cheese. because you can tell from the rind. Touch the rind and it's dry. It needs oiling, and it blooms as well.
And
So
how
with
long
the
does it
cheddar-
take with our cheese to bloom?
We do it about every 3 weeks now. At the beginning, we were doing it every 2 weeks, and but then we did it every 3 weeks, and sometimes we leave it a bit longer to let it really bloom up, and then we put the oil back on and the paprika and turn it. And as well as turning it, we rotate it, because we noticed that maybe it's the design of our room or where it is next to the shelves it's next to, but the bloom wasn't happening equally on the sides of the cylinder. So every day we move it like 90 degrees basically, and that helps to get the bloom equal as well.
Mary, when we looked at the cheeses and the blooms developing on your nursery cheeses, you observed that as well, don't you? You get bloom fully flushing on one side of the same cheese, which has had the same, and then there are sort of spots on the other side where it's not coming on so strong.
Yeah, and in the main, the pattern on a cheese will be equal, or it'll have. I always think it's, is it a Matisse or a Paul Klee or an abstract expressionist? And if it's going to be whichever style it is, it tends to be that across the whole cheese. It doesn't change from one style to another in a single cheese. I guess our airflows, we aim to have our airflow quite even, gentle but even throughout the whole store.
So because you are going to be chairing the judges on the 27th, but you're not going to be a judge yourself, is that right?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, I'm just fascinated. I really want to know what's happening. I want to learn. Well, I think the whole industry wants to learn. I think this is such an important thing for us to understand what's going on and what else we can do.
Okay, Alex, you've got a fast-moving cellar with lots of different cheeses in there at the same time. Well, I'm assuming there is a family of rinds going on there of every conceivable thing. Is that what you're aiming for, to get interesting flora onto your cheeses?
Yes. So I would say in some respects, we've taken a much more conservative approach to maturing this cheese compared to Brindisa especially. You're right to say our cellar, we have a large variety of different cheeses. We have a variety of different temperature zones within the cellar, and those both usually end up overall the same humidity, but a couple of different temperature zones. So in the hard cheese room that the cheddar is in, there are about 60 other types of cheese in that room. And the area that the cheddar is being matured in is where we keep our Alpine cheeses. So it is currently sat next to a big stack of Tome de Savoie. And those cheeses themselves have a really interesting complex microflora on the rinds. The rinds are really complex, very varied bacteria and mold that make up the rinds of some of these.
Would I be right in saying that is a mucor-based rind, or majority a mucor rind, that sort of grey, fluffy cat's fur kind of?
And I think it's similar to what Rupert, you were talking about with was it Garocha?
With the Garochas, yeah, similar, very sort of
cat's fur appearance to the rind.
So we need to know, has it made the jump? Is your cheese turning into a big fluffy kind of cat's toy?
It's not it hasn't completely grown a fur all over it. There are interesting spots here and there, and we found as well that the position it is in the room, it must be something to do with the airflow in that part of the room, that as well as turning it end to end to even out the moisture level, we've been turning it, if it makes sense, around on itself. We found initially that it started to build up mold on one side closer to the wall, and I think there must be something to do with the airflow. The moisture was building up, spores were building up on one side of it, so we started to turn it around, and it gradually started to even out, and we've got this bloom that's now working its way around the whole cheese. It's in terms of what we've been doing to it, we haven't done anything as drastic as remove the cloth. My main approach was really to see what effect the microflora in our cellars would have. Having so many different types of cheese stored in there, and what I imagine such a varied microflora compared to where a cheddar like this would normally be stored, so with the cheesemaker, in an environment where it's only with other cheeses from the same farm, of the same style. What I was really interested in is to see if the constantly evolving and changing microflora in our cellar, I want to see what it does. We really have no idea what effect it will have, and how many different molds and bacteria it will pick up from the Alpine cheeses, from the Dutch cheeses we have in there.
Well, what we know is that these molds and yeasts, they are in competition with each other, and they will come forward or be repressed by temperature, humidity, age, whatever's eating it. So you might have a mold or a yeast dominant that 3 months later will be subtly different or possibly completely different. So you might have different ages in your cellar, Alex, where the cheese has gone through different sort of epochs in its development.
Yes, and it's another interesting thing about this is we haven't really tracked over a long period before how the microflora in those cellars evolves. I would imagine if you have a stable, if you were making same cheese every day and populating your cellar with the same 1 or 2 cheeses from your farm, you would have a much more stable population of microflora, and that would change over time. But like you say, some would become dominant and they would outcompete the others and would form a stable population.
Well, one of the really interesting things from a guy called Ben Wolfe, who's been studying the rinds of cheese, is that we think of this sort of microflora as being, whichever of the bugs they are. But when he analysed the genetics, what he found is that each farm had a distinctive genome, even if it was one species. So they were all the time competing and creating little subspecies. So it'd be absolutely fascinating to see what's happening in your store.
So somewhere in your store there might be an Omicron variant of a subspecies.
A German Street specific subspecies of Candidum down here somewhere.
I think it's I mean, there's that fact that the Gabine cheese, which is a washed rind cheese, they did an analysis of that and found a type of bacteria that it was totally new to science, and now there's a bacteria called a Gabinese. Cheese is contributing back. So
it's certainly very fascinating.
So you've got this cheese there. You're basically throwing, possibly of all the competitors in this competition, you're giving it the greatest variety, which is one that is so exciting, but also, as you say, it's going to be really difficult to track what's happened to it.
Yes, and aside from doing sort of microbiological analysis of the rind every sort of 6 weeks, which
you don't have the budget.
I just thought of that now. That would have been a good idea. We've been tasting it, which is.
How's it tasting? I'm dying to know. Do you know? The other morning, I woke up with a bad dream, and it was I had just tasted the Affineur, the cheese, and it didn't taste good. But I then went and tasted the cheese.
No, we're not having any of that negative vibe here, Mary. It's all going to be awesome.
It tasted lovely. So, how's it been tasting? I'm dying to know.
Well, you'll have to find out at the final.
I agree. No spoilers here. Come on, everyone watching. That's a good time for me to remind people to get your tickets if you haven't got them already. 27th of April in London, getting through the Academy of Cheese. We also, apart from the opportunity to taste everything, is that Monica in the background?
Yes, it is. I think
It's a
I think
beautiful view.
we need wood.
So
and fire.
27th of April, we have got the opportunity for everyone to come and taste all these cheeses. You'll be able to taste the original Mary's cheese that was come all the way through in the traditional format in her cellars there. And you'll be able to taste everyone else's. There's also going to be some wine to have. There's going to be Drew Baker's bringing his charcuterie range around. So it's going to be a lot going on. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please come and join us. But let's talk briefly about the fascinating subject of mite. Mite. Now, when I came down to see you, Mary, you told me something I'd never heard before. You use mite to garden your mold, basically. Hi, Monica. So the mold comes up, it comes into the big cellar at 3 months, 3 to 5 months after that, you've got a full bloom, and then you're beginning to see around the 8-month mark, significant mite ingress onto the cheeses, and you keep them down, you repress them to make sure the mold doesn't get out of control. But likewise, you don't want the mite out of control so that it starts eating the cheese, not the mold. Is that sort of roughly? Was I paying attention?
Yeah, sure. We think if there's a very high level of mold, then when you take the cloth off, you will get some discoloration, which maybe that's fine. But we always think it's better if people tend to get a bit upset if it gets too dark in the rind, or not upset, but they wonder what's going on. And so I'm quite keen on keeping that mold garden, reasonably trimmed. And for us, the cheese mite, the food of a cheese mite is mold. So it's great that they're there nibbling away, just keeping it trimmed down. But if you leave the mite uncontrolled, they just keep breeding. There are too many come on it. They start to eat into the rind of the cheese, and the cheese starts cracking, and you start getting lots of internal mold and find mite in your cheese, which is just not particularly appetizing. But so we tend to blow them once a month using a big machine that we've invented, which sucks the air, moves the air with a dust extractor, and then we fire at the cheese we fire at it filtered air from the sort of thing that you would fill your car tire up with, only filtered.
It's like a pressure washer, but with air, basically.
Pressure washer with air that gets the mold airborne, and we do that about once a month from about 6-7 months old, so that we keep the mite at a juvenile state. And I always think the juvenile might smell right. They provide a nice input into that flavour of the cheese rind. But when them might get to be adults, they taste a bit like kind of dog pee, perhaps is the relevant smell, and which I think isn't maybe a little bit sort of nitrogenous, because they're eating, instead of eating mold that they like to eat, you're forcing them to eat cheese, and so they're they smell a bit kind of sweaty. And for me, that's not the right aroma.
That's not the right aroma. No, I think that anybody who's been around cheese long enough knows that cheese mitey feel to it, that it's not so good. Alex, do you get cheese mite in your cellars normally? And on this occasion, has it made its way to your Quicks cheese?
Yes, I think anyone who stores cheese for a significant amount of time will generate a population of cheese mites. It is, for what we do, it's something we try and minimize as much as possible. By the time the cheeses reach us, usually they are. Did you say you start to see them from about 5 months on, Mary?
Well, actually, it's depending on how well controlled we got the mite, it's between about 6 and 7 months. But on what's interesting on little cheeses, on our 1.8 kilo cheeses, that's on the 27 kilo cheeses, but on the 1.8 kilo cheeses, we'll tend to see mite from about 3 months, 3-4 months. So I think that's because those cheeses dry out a lot more, and they perhaps develop their mold coat just a bit earlier.
So it's not the cheese that attracts the mite, it's the mold. So the mold has to develop to a certain point before the cheese might go, yes, it's worth coming over to this shelf. Because you showed me something when we were there, when I was with you, Mary, where you can spot the first indications of mite because the molds itself, the little round clusters of mold pattern begin to have what you describe as a cliff edge. You can see the nibble marks of the mite.
Yeah, yes, I've become very acquainted with the ways of mite.
With the ways of mite. So Alex, how are you brushing your cheeses to keep the mite down?
Yes, so normally the cheeses arrive to us in a much more mature state, and some may have some signs come in with some signs of mite. Some may develop it if we're not careful in the cellar. So usually brushing, we tend to brush them gently off the surface of the cheese, and then hoover up anything the rest of the cellar. So there's a lot of as with cheese making, affinage of cheese is 80% cleaning. So the cellar is frequently
Feels that way about all cooking, actually.
Rubbed down and hoovered, but the hoovering specifically to remove the mite. The hoovers and the air is quite effective at removing the mites, but we tend to, off the actual cheeses themselves, we have to brush them gently with the brush. It's interesting that you didn't see until 6 or 7 months on the 27 kilo cheeses. I would say just last week was the first time I had noticed any mite on our cheese.
Wow,
Which
It was
so
very
let-
interesting. We
let-
hadn't
let-
noticed any until very recently.
So you are, get me right, you got, was it the 19th of February the cheese was born?
19th of February. That's
So this
correct.
cheese has now just crested the year for you, Alex, and maybe it's because you haven't got so much mite in your cellar. Rupert, I'm guessing that it's not such an issue if you're washing your cheese every 4 weeks with an oil and paprika solution.
Yeah, I mean the oil smothers any mites that might kind of migrate onto the cheddar. They don't last long at all. So no.
So it's
But
mite.
we do have
Spanish-
mites on the manchegos. There's mites in the room, which
Right.
we mostly on the cured manchegos. They get the most mites, but for the other cheeses, maybe we don't have them for long enough either in the rooms to need to clean them for mites.
So is affineuring I mean, it's a French word. Is it a Spanish thing? Do a lot of Spaniards affineur their cheeses?
Well, a lot of cheesemakers do. They do the affinage themselves. The idea of having an affineur who buys cheese from different dairies is it's not very widespread in Spain. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 people that I know of. I know in Cabrales, in Picos de Europa, I know that traditionally some of the affineurs there have bought cheeses from different small farms up in the mountains and then aged them in their own caves, and then here on the island of Menorca as well. But also in Spain, because there's an artisan cheese revolution going on in Spain as well at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so people who've had experience of working in London in all the the big cheese companies of artisan cheese companies in London have gone back to Spain and started working in very similar ways. So
Well,
they've been very inspired
The
by
recent
the
winner of
British
the World
cheese
Cheese
scene as
Awards
well.
is a Spanish cheese, isn't it? So I can't remember.
Oh,
November.
the quesos y besos.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love it. Just in case anyone missed that, that's cheeses and kisses in
Yes.
Spanish. So, and they must be part of that artisan revolution that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it was kind of partly as a result of the economic crisis in 2007, where a lot of young people were unemployed, and they went back to their villages and started to make things and just become entrepreneurs in order to survive. And there was this whole kind of renaissance of new young cheesemakers that just
That
took
is
off
so
at that time.
interesting, because we've seen that renaissance in Britain, but we're 20 to 30 years into it now. Of the real flowering of new diversity, and of course the American market, they had to create it from scratch. But it's interesting to hear you talk about it going into basically an old world market where there's a lot of established good cheese, a lot of traditional cheese making techniques based on region, and now it's getting that sort of second flowering of cheese making styles.
Yes, it's like young people kind of leaving the city and you know, and in a way not being kind of bound by tradition. Just like doing what they want, doing what they want with the raw materials, which I always find quite refreshing, really.
So, are there any questions you guys would like to ask each other of your experience, Alex to Rupert or Rupert to Alex? Are you wishing, Alex, that you'd thought of covering it in paprika or London stout or something?
Well, I would. Yeah, I was gonna ask Rupert. Have you? I mean, we'll find out the final what they all taste like side by side. But I'd be interested to see how you think the flavor has developed underneath the oil rind as opposed to underneath the cloth, because you know we've seen the sort of progression in flavor that we would have expected. So when we first tasted the cheese, it was it had this real sort of grassy sweetness to it, but it didn't have any of the deeper sort of brothy, savory notes that we would expect from the finished cheese. And the fat content felt really high at the start. So when we sample the cheese with the cheese iron, on the back of the iron, you can see the fat content from the cheese. And when they're quite young like that, it often appears really, sort of feels really sort of fatty in your mouth, and you can see on the back of the cheese iron as well. And that has over time sort of dropped off, and with the texture of the cheese sort of firming up and drying a little bit. And we've noticed that more of those sort of savory, meaty broth flavors. It's interesting that we found that in ours, I perhaps wish that we'd matured it at a slightly higher temperature. Ours has been between 10 and 12 degrees, but I would imagine it's actually been closer to 10 most of that time. And I think I would have preferred to, or it'd be interesting to try it again at a slightly higher temperature, sort of 12 to 13. The progression was just a bit slower than I expected, and I think we've got a milder tasting cheese than I was perhaps expecting to.
No, don't give away any of that kind of. Let's keep all the tastes under the table until the 27th, Alex. We don't want to be giving
the last time we
away.
tried it, you know.
Rupert, have you got any questions for Alex? Or
but I mean, it's retained the sort of the grassy sweetness is retained because of perhaps the cooler temperature, which I found really interesting. I was interested to see how yours has changed under the oil.
We've got quite a similar situation as well, because most of our cheeses are, you know, between either in that room are either 1 kilo, 2.5 kilos, or 3.5 kilos. And so the temperature, I tend to keep the temperature on the lower side because you know, the grotches, they just crack, like they just open up. If I raise the temperature in there, they'll crack, and the mahon will crack as well. So we've had our cheese, you know, between like an 8 and 10 degrees for most of the time, but because it wasn't cloth bound, we're kind of hoping that one way or another it's going to balance out in the end. And but we have noticed those more kind of, you know, bouillon-y flavors developing kind of recently. I mean, cheese, it won't taste of paprika. I mean, the paprika is part of the rind, it's part of the protective layer, and so there's like hints of smokiness, but it's not going to taste like a you know, like a milky chorizo or anything like that. It's still in the world of cheddar.
It's a very big
I'm really
cheddar. So the middle is a long way from the edge in a cheddar. Your mahons, you know, what is it? A sort of 4-inch cheese, 3-4 inch cheese. It's about 3 inches high, really. Yeah. And but I'm really intrigued by the thought of having
I think you said about 200 different cheeses in the room, and imagining how the microflora developed. I mean, that kind of that like a shiver went down my spine when I heard that. I thought, like, wow, that's really exciting.
It's like the Jackson
to,
Pollock of Affineur.
I'd be really intrigued to see that.
Throw everything at the wall and see what happens.
Yeah. So
we're coming to the end now. Before I sort of give Mary the last word, because it was her cows. Let's just remind everybody that we need to see you on the 27th, one way or another. We're going to try and do something online. We're not quite sure what yet, but stay in tune. We've got one last Meet the Competitors, which is next Tuesday. I won't be here, but Mary and Tracy will be hosting that one, where we will see who we got. Neil's Yard and Rory Buchanan presenting their cheeses. Neil's Yard have got 2 cheeses that they're trying to think. They have an interesting history there, so hopefully we'll get a bit of fireworks there about the 2 competing ideologies. And then we've got the Run Through Easter, and then April 27th is the big meet when we can come and taste it. Tracy, have I missed anything?
Well, I've just had a thought while you were talking. Well, Rupert was having shivers down his spine about the 200 cheeses in Mary's cathedral of cheddar. I think, Mary, you're going to have to invite all the competitors to Quicks down to the farm, aren't you? To see the cathedral of cheddar afterwards as like a thank you for competing.
Oh, that would be a great thing.
After show party.
After show party, yeah, you are invited if you would like.
As long as everybody's still talking to each other. So yeah, next week, you're right, Charlie, we've got 2 different people from Neil's Yard. We've got Estelle and Katie, because one of them, the cheddars, has been maturing in the maturing rooms at Bermondsey, and one has been maturing in the shop at Borough. So 2 very different styles. Neil's Yard have been using this to help some of their younger cheesemongers and keepers of cheese to learn all about affinage. So it's going to be very exciting to hear what they've learned as well. And of course, Rory's Buchanan's going to be great to hear what they've been doing. Sure, tickets for the finals, as Charlie's been plugging, I put a link in the chat as well. It is going to be, the judging is going to start at 3 p.m, but we're hoping to announce the winner at 5, and it is a drop-in event, so if you can't make it at 3, get there for 5, and then we're going to be celebrating and tasting all the cheeses from 5 till 7:30.
It's going to get social.
It's going to get very social. We've got Sharpen Wines, we've got some people, Find and Foster Cider, Southbourne Ales, and obviously Drew with his Tempest Charcuterie. Plus, all of the competitors are bringing some of their other cheeses. So, Rupert, I hope you're going to bring to the party, to your table at the finals, those 2 cheeses that have been maturing sitting alongside, because I think they should celebrate, with your cheese as well at this finals and be there. So we're going to be able to taste loads and loads of different cheeses, not just these cheddars, but to be honest, I'm just so excited to taste the 10 cheeses, and I'm sure you are, Mary. Your babies want A1.
Well, my babies have been exploring the world. And it's so exciting, and I just really want this to kickstart that whole discussion about what's possible with affinage in this country, and I'm just so excited by what Alex and Rupert are doing. So thank you so much for sharing what you've been doing. It's just stunning.
And we've got Alison here in the chat, and he's saying Alison is saying that she'll be there at 3. Good girl. Stay the long haul from 3 till 7:30. Brilliant.
Well, is that us saying good night then, Tracy?
It is. Thank you so much, Charlie. Thank you, Mary.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Rupert. Amazing. And yeah, take care and enjoy Menorca, Rupert. I just love your little cottage out there. It looks fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, we will. Thanks. Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Take care. Good evening.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.